And we are also live on YouTube. We're ready to go, man. This is it. This is our first debut show, you guys.
This is it.
And for those just tuning in and don't know what it is, we're live off the cuff, which is the name of our show because we have no idea what we're going to say. But we do this every day anyway. We not necessarily all three of us all the time, and not with certainly printed out little things, but we get together and chat about whatever's going on in life and apply to our Christian worldview. And so we'll talk about all these crazy stuff. But some of the things we say are genius. Mostly that's on my side. Some of them are probably offensive. That's mostly on that side. So we thought, what a great way to capture the offensive, horrible things we say and make them visible to people. So we're going to do this live, and we'll see what happens unscripted. So just to introduce ourselves, I'm Joe Miller. I have JR and everything because Joe Miller is such a common name. No one would ever find me. Still can't find me with JR Miller, but it makes me feel a little bit better. There's a long story behind JR, but I won't go into that. At least not now. Then we got Leroy Hill.
That is me.
And that's Leroy Hill. And we got Ward Crocker. Now, we're not going to give a whole lot of background, but I will start with saying this. Leroy, apparently there is some confusion about you being from West Philadelphia. Born and raised.
I'm not from West Philadelphia.
You're not from West Philadelphia.
Every person in Philadelphia knows where they're from. And if you're from like North Philly, that's where all the really tough people live in North Philly.
So you're not tough.
So I'm not. No. See, it's a mix. West Philly is where all the so-called pretty boys live at. People who try to be pretty boys, but Southwest Philadelphia.
So that West Philadelphia, born and raised, I think that's all a pretty boy thing.
It certainly is. It's kind of interesting. I think I told you guys this. In that video was a guy I played high school football with, a guy named Omar, and then a guy who grew up right around the corner from me named Charlie Mack. He was a real big guy in the video.
In the old Will Smith Fresh Prince thing, the guy spinning him around.
Yeah, he's actually was Will Smith's bodyguard. But there's a whole interesting story. Guys from West Philly, y'all know what that story is. So Southwest Philly, you know what that story is. So we'll go ahead and leave that.
So alone. You're not a pretty boy.
So I'm not. But
what is West?
Southwest Philly is where I mean. It's hard to say this, but people know serious crazy.
He's hesitating now. He told us a lot more directly the other day.
I was a lot more. Well, that's where all the real killers live at in Southwest Philadelphia.
See, he's afraid to say now he's live.
That is where. So you need to be wary about Southwest Philly. I mean,
that's where you're from.
That's where I'm from.
So you're a killer.
Yeah, straight killer.
Yeah,
straight.
This sounds like geographical judging.
But like South Philly. When you said South Philly,
South Philly is where all the Italian guys live at. I mean, so it's a little different. Now, I had a cousin named Daryl.
But did you say thugs were from one? What was that one?
That was North Philly.
Oh, North Philly. You said they're pretty boys.
No. That's West Philly.
West Philly. See, I can't keep them
North Philly. I had a cousin who lived there, and he used to walk around with a baseball bat every day. He could not leave his house without a baseball bat. So, and everybody knows that I'm not kidding. I mean, it's just what it is. I mean, it's just serious.
You're serious about that.
I'm very serious about that. You do not.
This is something we're learning.
Right. You do not go to North Philly playing around. You do not.
See, we just from the other side of Pennsylvania, where all the Yinzers are from.
Yes.
We look at just you're the users, and use guys. We're the Yinzers.
You're the Yins.
And we just look at you all the same. It's just from the, Philadelphia. It's just the filthy city.
But
we don't care.
I understand,
we're from the other part of the state.
I understand where that's coming from. I really get where that's coming from.
It's the city of the NFL one-hit wonder.
He went right there. Look at that. He went right there.
All I got to say about it is world champions. I'll just leave it at that. World champions.
Finally.
If you can say finally.
No, it's true. Finally. I feel good.
I don't get world champion.
That's all right. No, I'm glad they won. That's better than the other terrible team. So I'm glad they cheer for
Look, Philadelphia is like the greatest city in order to grow up in. It just is. And we have the greatest football team in the world.
You're talking about pro sports now, right?
It doesn't matter.
Okay,
I mean, because
this is hours of fun. We go this, but let's move on to other little pressing stories that you guys have found interesting. So just formatting note for everyone else, since we're just doing this, we're just kind of printing out stories that we find interesting throughout. Some are news stories, some are books we read, some are journal articles. I mean, whatever we kind of find interesting, that's just what we're going to go with. And we don't talk about these particular ones necessarily ahead of time. So these guys have no idea what's in my little stack, and I have no idea what's in theirs. And we're just going to test how knowledgeable one another is on topics. So I actually, speaking of testing knowledge, I will start with this one. But I just read this one today. Just happened to come across it. And I thought this was going to be a great test to most likely embarrass you of your knowledge. But that's a good thing. So there's a survey that we did with 170 political experts.
Who's we?
We did. Oh, I'm sorry. This is coming from Jared, a guy named Jared. This is where the heck is this? Daily Signal. So this is off Daily Signal, and they're just reporting that somebody did 170 journalists. People can Google who this somebody is. I don't really even care. I just think it's funny. So the 170 political experts, journalists. They're experts in U.S. politics, presidential politics. These are expert people. And they had 170 of them, and they ranked Trump as the last. Whatever, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even care about Trump. This is what part I thought was interesting. Now I'll quote from the little story here. So when asked which presidents should be the next to be placed on Mount Rushmore, 5 of these 170 experts listed their list of the next people to include were Lincoln, Washington, and Theodore Roosevelt. Does anyone know what's wrong with this picture?
They're already
Yeah. So these presidential political experts,
these experts are
pick
suggesting
the next people to be on are 3 of the presidents that are already on Rushmore.
It seems like each one of those experts should be fired from their job.
That was your test to see if you knew that those 3 were on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is just so confusing. I mean, it's like, what do you do? What are you doing all day if you're an expert? I mean, are you like reading it? Are you studying it?
Apparently not. For those,
not.
apparently not for those guys. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny, and I was going to test you guys if you knew those 3 were on Rushmore or not. So it's kind of a leading. I should have just asked you, all right, who are the 5 people on there, 5 presidents on there, but I didn't want to go that far. So
Well, who are they?
who was the other 2?
Who are the other ones, Ward?
I gave you 3. I spotted you 3.
It's Reagan. No, there was the push for that for Reagan.
Lincoln,
I lived
Washington,
in South
Roosevelt.
Dakota, and so I should remember. I thought it was 4.
It's 4.
I thought it was
There's
4.
7.
No
way.
There's not.
No, it's
No,
not.
that's
it's
not.
only 4.
Oh, there's not 7.
Yeah,
So
correct.
we're not political experts, so I don't
Yeah,
care.
no, but I do know. that
Jefferson?
four.
I'm just messing with you.
Is Jefferson one of them?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. All right. He must have been from West Philly or
Southwest
Philly.
Philly.
Yeah. So,
Born and raised.
Yeah. All right. Well, and by the way, if anyone's really confused about what we're talking about with West Philly stuff, you can go to the website. So whether you're watching on Periscope or on YouTube Live, so we have our bios posted on the website, which is morethancake.org/off the cuff. And we got all of our bios, and you can read Leroy's bio, which you've never updated.
Which
by
I've
the
never,
way.
but
I put it because he never sent me
totally
anything.
even thinking about that, I was looking at the pictures, and I just had a problem with all the pictures on there. First of all, they make Ward look like a cool dude.
No, you're talking about the cartoon ones.
picture.
I
He
made
looks
this,
cool.
so you're criticizing my
He's got a
artwork.
nice jacket on and a nice shirt, so that people didn't really know him. They would look at him and say, "Man, that is a cool guy," and we know Ward is anything but cool. And then
That's
you got
true.
me looking. I asked you, who is the third person? It doesn't look
couldn't
anything
tell?
like. It doesn't look anything like me.
I'm pretty sure it looks something like you.
Well, it
Oh
doesn't
my
look
gosh.
anything like me. Anyway.
and all this is the reason why you didn't update your profile.
Well, it's just
words?
protest.
This is your
it's
protest?
Oh,
protest.
Okay.
Oh
More
my gosh.
protest.
Absolutely
Wow.
protest.
Yeah.
Wow. What is
Protest.
it? Hashtag Me Too? Is that what's going on? So,
Leroy's life matters.
Yes,
Leroy's like,
That's
yes.
probably dangerous territory.
Absolutely.
well, I ran into a couple of things. One thing I wanted to bring up is on the lighter side, a little bit lighter side, but something I can relate to.
I'm not sure. Are you triggered by
It's
that?
like we're slamming things, not to slam things on the desk, and here he is.
I know. First thing I say, don't slam
Slam
it.
anything, and here he is.
He wants to draw attention to his.
No, sorry about that.
No, you're not.
There was a young
I know
gal.
exactly what he's going to say.
There was a young gal with her 8-month-old infant or 8-month-old baby on a plane, and they just got on the plane. And another lady came down, and right next to her, before the plane started, before the baby hadn't cried or anything, she was screaming about that baby better not make any noise.
The
That
person
ba-
next to her.
yeah, that person next to her like that. Such that she, the unruly passenger, was kicked off the plane before it even got started, before it took off, and the baby hadn't even made a sound. And then another one was.
Well, I saw the video. I just happened to see that today, like, because I'm like, everyone's been talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story I really don't even care about because people are nuts. But well, you brought it up, so we'll talk about it.
Right.
But the only video clip I saw, maybe there's more, is where the stewardess is. You don't call them stewardess anymore, do you? Flight attendants. Yeah, flight attendants. Sorry, I apologize to stewardesses everywhere. I mean, flight attendants everywhere. It's ingrained in me. I can't. But so the flight attendant's kicking this gal off, right. and she's like, "What's your name? I'm gonna have you fired tomorrow." And then
and she was laid off.
Yeah.
She was. I don't know if she's been canned or not.
Yeah, she was fired. She was fired. She kept saying, "I work."
No.
The
lady who
was threatening the flight attendant. She's like, "I work for the governor. I'm
right.
important, and you're not important."
Well,
so she got.
The governor was like, "Bye."
Yeah, I saw that she was for the site. But my question is, because there was another one like the next day, a flight from Germany to New Jersey. There was a boy that screamed for 8 solid hours.
Oh my God!
8 solid hours, and was videotaped 8 solid hours.
I've been on that flight. And
so my question is, what do we do in situations like that?
Put a parachute on them and throw them out.
Exactly.
So
that is an option.
Because
there's
it's the best one. I just said it's an option.
All right.
The best story I heard is where this mom with the baby was crying on the plane, and this guy gets up and he holds the baby.
Yep,
until the baby stops crying, which I thought was really cool.
Was it just a random guy?
This is a random guy.
Oh,
and that was really good. But see, I thought that he was going to bring out the story of the guy who was dropping human chemical weapons, if you can imagine what they are, on the plane. So much so that they had to redirect the plane because of his waste product.
No, I wasn't talking about that. No, because I was talking about this because this happens. This is real life. People get on planes. It's kind of happened to us a little bit when we were on a plane. Mm-hmm. Reese started to cry a little bit, and there was a guy in front of us who was actually really rude. He got up and he was rude, specifically to my wife, and I didn't put up with that. But had all these people.
I'm listening to her. Keep talking. Yeah. I'm just going to adjust the camera because Leroy's slightly out of the picture, and I'm just going to fix it.
Leroy's ajar.
No, you're okay. Keep talking, Leroy. Keep talking, Ward.
And so four people came up. And they were like, "No, worry about it. What did that person say? They were rude. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine." I was really impressed. We were really impressed with how kind everyone was about the situation, even though our boy was crying. And here you have this lady, the baby hasn't even done anything, and contrast that with one with an 8-hour screaming fest. So parents are very sensitive to, and passengers are sensitive to the issue of kids on planes. Such that there are flights now where it's a no-kid flight, right?
That's good.
And there's no kids. Kids, you can't bring them on.
Which airline is that one?
I don't recall.
I'm gonna get miles on
there. You get miles
start
on that.
Collecting frequent flyers on that.
But I think for us as Christians, we need to make sure that we default the side of grace and kindness, like you mentioned, the guy who
But so much of that though. The truth is, a lot of that is because just culturally you're either angry or you're not. Those are the only options left. You're either at a level 10 of anger or you just are ambivalent because you don't know about it. But and then if you hear a story and you're not angry about it, you're obviously supporting it. Right. So it's like there's this divide in the culture where everything is this massive trigger that you have to be at a level 10. The lady can't just come in and say, "Oh man, I hope your kid's not crying," or "Hey stewardess, if this kid cries, is there a way I could move somewhere else?" You can't just calmly, rationally talk about something.
You have to display hostility.
Right.
That's just an interesting situation because when you're in a counseling situation and you're counseling people, I always ask people, why is it always like 0 or 10? There's like never anything in between. There's never like there's like angry, and then there's like I'm just not engaged. But then there's like it's either or. It's always the extreme, especially when you're in situations where you just don't know or how to handle or respond. You just emote, and it's just difficult.
Why is it though? Why is it? It seems like it's getting worse though.
It is getting worse.
Immaturity.
Absolutely.
Immature. I don't know.
Immaturity in the sense that.
But what the culture is lending itself to that?
Right.
Is it just like
video
games, or is it just being totally self-absorbed, or?
They're being taught me, my emotions matter such that if I have If I have an opinion, if I have an emotion, it's as valid, if not more valid than yours. And so you need to cater. Now your life needs to change such that it caters to my whims, my wants, and my emotions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Truth is no longer valued.
Existentialism.
Yeah.
My experience determines reality for everybody, kind of thing.
And for everyone, it's not just for me. It's not just relativism. It's relativism imposed. It's personal relativism imposed on everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impositional and relativism.
Forced narcissism.
You got to think that we live in a society where we all have to live together. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't all live in the same house. Praise the Lord. But we all have to live.
I live in a house with 7 people, so that's
exactly.
That's at the end right there.
You have to learn how.
Sorry
how
if
to
my
cope,
family's listening.
How to cope and compensate with people who you don't agree with, or people who offend you, or people who are just different. Than you.
The right not to be offended is our new.
I mean, it's like what I love about our church is that there's going to be babies crying, and when I was a kid, there was no parent room, there was no room for whether you had to store the babies away. They cried in the sermon. And you just get used to it. Yeah. I mean, it's normal. It's life. They're parent with babies. They're going to cry. Babies cry.
Dude, I went down to Mexico.
Catch me out, dogs bark, babies cry.
I went to Mexico years ago on a little trip with the youth group. And, we were at this small little town, El Mezquital, the mosquito. Mm-hmm. And so it's like this little cool little fishing town. And there was a church there, man. And it was like, families were all in there about their kids. I mean, I think there were animals in there with them. I mean, just that would wander through or whatever. And it didn't matter. I mean, nobody cared because they were there to worship. They were just doing their thing. And from an American perspective, you're like, oh no, we have to have this totally quiet environment. And I do think we've lost this sense that we can focus without any distractions, but also it's like any distraction is just like a major
deal.
We can't, somebody's in front of me in line. That's an offense. It's just everything.
Cuts me off on the freeway. I mean,
sorry about that.
You just gotta be, exactly. You just gotta be
trying to beat
cool.
you into work.
You just gotta be cool. Yeah. This kind of leads into a bigger topic that we're kind of facing today, with assault weapons. I've just asked people.
That's a smooth transition.
Wow, what a segue.
That's exactly.
Yes, exactly.
I love crying babies.
Crying babies because babies are assault. No, I mean, I'm just kidding.
That's like
exactly.
Weapons of assault.
Weapons of assault. They're assaulting our ears.
Yeah, there you go. That's how you watch the news. That's how they do it. They go from the story. Bob, speaking of babies who assault our ears with their offensive noises, I feel like talking about assault rifles. And that's how they do it on the news.
And I guess the thing that kind of is interesting to me is that I just want someone to define for me what an assault weapon is. What is an assault weapon? Because if you listen to the definitions of what an assault weapon is today, just about every single gun made fits into that assault weapon. If you want to say it's an assault weapon is a high volume gun, well, or a
define
rifle,
high volume.
Meaning shoots out a lot of rounds per minute. So you have.
Wait, we got to clarify something here.
Yes.
So just for full, disclosure, you were in the military.
I was.
So you're a warmonger.
Sure.
And you were a sniper person.
That is exactly right.
So you were trained to kill other human beings with assault weapons. So efficiently kill. So everything you say is really completely biased. So I'm just making that clear.
It's okay. It's okay.
That we have a reason right away to discount everything you said.
Biased. It may be.
I'm just kind of coming up with reasons to discount your entire opinion. I just want to make it easy for people.
But when you think about what's termed an assault weapon, generally the idea is not based on the amount of rounds that a rifle may shoot out. So an assault weapon is like an Uzi or a MAC-10. An Uzi or MAC-10 shoots out about 600 to 700 rounds per minute. I mean, that's a lot of rounds. You put a magazine in and you fire it and you say 1 Mississippi. Before you get done saying 1 Mississippi, all the rounds in that magazine are gone. Those guns are already illegal. M16, fully automatic, shoots out 600 to 700 rounds a minute.
Yeah, that's illegal. Yeah,
those are already illegal. Pistols, a Glock 18C shoots out 1,200 rounds per minute, and you can get 50 round magazines to pump in there. So imagine a 1,200 round per minute shooting gun with a magazine with 50 rounds in it. I mean, that's a pistol. So is that an assault weapon?
Yeah.
My point is not to say that people don't have a right to be fearful. But I think if we're going to have solid discussions about difficult issues, we have to be precise in what we mean. If we listen to the definitions that people make right now, they're merely just saying all guns.
Well, I know that the AR-15 is the big deal right now because
40,
that's what's been used on
45 to 70 rounds per minute.
Yeah, so it
45 to 70
doesn't get that many, but it's modeled to look
semi-automatic or
after.
fully automatic? Because the other ones you're talking about were fully automatic.
AR-15s
That
are
doesn't
semi-
have fully
I
automatic.
know, but if
Semi-automatic.
they would convert it to fully automatic, what would it be? Because that would be the
Well, it's
equation.
built off the M16,
Yeah,
so it
Right,
looks like
that would be the equation.
But
'cause
but if you're converting a rifle
Mhm.
to automatic, it's already illegal to have it.
I understand it is,
Right.
but the numbers you quoted before.
Right. Well, it would,
well,
I would venture to say that because it's based on the M16, it would have the same
right,
capability.
but it can't do that because it's
Right.
yeah. So and it's limited
we
capacity.
can't, at least
Yeah.
not legally, but that's already,
Right, right.
So,
So-
but that's why I think that one's such a big deal because it looks like an
It
M16,
looks
but it's not in terms of firing rate any
Function.
different than like a 30-06 that somebody can
that's exactly right.
put a magazine
Right.
in there. and
Shotguns.
hunt with it.
You can get a shotgun. A Benelli 4 is you shoot 300 rounds per minute with a shotgun. Is that an assault weapon?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
you need
so-
to define their point. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
Right.
so you got to define the term, which is hard to do when everyone's
Right.
so emotional. It's like,
Sure.
and granted, some people who are in the experience have it to be, but it's
Right.
the problem is again, it's that hyper emotionalism where, like, I had a friend of mine on Twitter that I grew up with. His name is Keith, and he's a gun,
Guy.
like not no
Sure.
guns. He would like them all illegal. They're all bad and stuff
Sure.
like that. Which we've had good discussions over the years and stuff like that. But even then, it's like to try to engage in those environments, anything publicly, it's very difficult because people just way overreact. Not him personally, but I mean, even a public discussion with the two of us, that others could be a part of, it just degenerates so quickly
think-
into, oh, so you support killing human beings
Right.
because you want to, it's like,
Yeah, but it's
there's
very
no
interesting. Someone
ground on
said, and I want to give a nod to Ward. Ward said something that
oh,
was really,
whoa. Let's mark this because I know your wife is our official show listener. Margie so Margie, mark this time on the thing.
that actually
You
said
did us.
something nice about
The Leroy said something nice, affirming word.
right.
We'll put that in the liner notes so
But-
that people can know later when to tune in and get that. So
But he said something that I think is pretty wise. I mean,
Ward again, right?
Ward. I mean, which
Okay.
is just really difficult for me to say.
So you remember it because it's so rare.
It's so rare, right? And but he said that you want to turn the world or the schools. The schools are already places where there are no weapons whatsoever. And if you make all of America that way, what is the difference between what happens at the school and what happened in the rest of America? And I'm just paraphrasing. But if everybody's disarmed, that means that the only people that have guns are bad guys.
Yeah, that's
Well,
a problem.
kind of what I said was actually
Wow.
we-
So you're correct. He
Yeah.
says something nice.
I was trying to be
And now you're
nice.
going to correct him.
what I was going to say
Well,
was
Leroy,
we see the
you're
results.
inferior. The way you did that is far inferior to the way I did it.
I
So let
wanna
me
make sure-
correct
I
you.
just want to say it in such a way as to
No,
clean up
no.
what you said.
We see the results of making places gun-free zones. And a gun-free zone is a place where you have victims when someone with a gun shows up. So that's the problem with this whole gun-free zones, disarming people. And for instance, like in California, looks like Governor Brown has or will sign in to law where teachers cannot be armed on campus. So you strip the guns away from law-abiding citizens. And what do you have? Well,
The
case
wild
in
beasts
point,
with guns.
go to any school that's gun-free zone and someone shows up with bad intent with a gun,
But if Governor
that's the
Brown
result.
signs that law, says teachers can't.
right.
If the
Administrators.
teacher is here illegally, can they still then not carry a gun? Is that
That's-
because I mean they're not going to get rid? You wouldn't want to get
he
rid
also
of them.
signed, it looks like they also signed a law. This one, no, seriously, this is
No, it's not in
important.
California.
No, this is important.
Don't even.
That if someone commits a crime with a weapon, they don't necessarily get more time tacked on for having a weapon. That used to be automatic.
There should be sentencing features that if you commit a crime with a gun,
with a gun, you automatically get more time.
So we hate guns.
And
Well,
so he's
California is nuts.
eliminating that. Now that's I haven't verified that, but I need to go back. But it looks like that makes sense.
California is
for-
nuts anyway because I mean
But
think
still.
about this. We talk about what can we do about all this
Right.
stuff and defining those terms.
We see the
That's the first
results
thing.
of a gun-free zone. When someone shows
Yeah.
up, that's the results you have.
But
all the people are dead.
California,
That's a
the
problem.
problem here is like we don't even enforce the laws we have.
Correct.
So they said that and right now it's illegal for anybody who is a felon, has a felony conviction, And there's one other category I can't remember. I know, if you've been diagnosed with some sort of mental illness. That's illegal right now in California.
Right.
And apparently there's a registry that shows I think I heard it yesterday, so I'll probably get 36,000 people in California that are registered gun owners and fit one of those other categories of whether they're a felon or not. So we know of 26 to 36,000 people who have guns that are by law not supposed to have them, but California doesn't do anything about it. Yet we complain when there is gun violence. Like, what do we do? Well, we start to enforce the laws. I mean, goodness gracious. If we're not even willing to do that, what's the point of passing more laws if you don't enforce the ones that exist?
Part of the problem with that is how you define mental illness. If you listen to Women on the View, and you shouldn't, but if you listen to Women on the View, and they want to say that
just the women word.
Well, there's
they're only women on the View.
So you have to point that out. I'm just saying your gender bias is clear.
They want to say that Vice President Pence has a mental illness.
Yeah, because he
listens to Jesus or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Well, now does that become a mental illness?
These is the fear about it. Yeah,
absolutely, because these are vague phrases, like you mentioned before about assault rifle. They're hiding behind vague phrases when it comes to things such as a Black Lives Matter, which they do.
That's exactly right.
But then the details of the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance.
Why did you pat Leroy when you said that?
I was wondering about that. I think he's just nervous being on television.
Right. Yeah, that's why I don't talk.
It's better than doing this one. So he's like, he's trying to calm himself. He wants you to really pat him a little bit and calm him.
Climate change. What's such a vague phrase? Of course, they mean something very specific about it.
Right.
So they use these general things. Assault weapon. You can't define assault weapon without eliminating almost every weapon, which many people are okay with that. So this is the rationale, the type of thinking that transpires in our culture, where it's vague. They hide behind vagueness to be able to get to a point, and they can't really have a legitimate.
And then they get mad at you when you start pointing out that you're not being specific.
And that's where the reaction goes.
That's when we start going, we're going to unfriend you.
Right.
Yeah,
we're going to block you.
So when I teach my class for ethics and stuff, it's funny because one of the first I teach it. I don't necessarily
I just want to make sure we're good on that.
Those who can't do teach.
Right.
So it's that's true for everyone.
I agree.
So, but we talk about this idea of defining what these words mean, and it's surprising how many students are like, "Oh, it's just a revolutionary concept of like, wait a second, I got to define what all these terms mean," and that's important.
If you don't, you don't.
But you bring that up.
What you're talking about.
And I didn't know if this would come up, but here's a story I have that I printed out.
All right, hit us.
I won't give the full title because the person that this is related to, people will, if they Google enough of the keywords, they'll figure it out. But I don't want to make it about the person that's being sort of diagnosed. Sure. Their discussion is about theology. Now, this came from the Mama Bear Apologetics. It's a blog that's online. They do a podcast. I've seen some of the stuff they've written. I've seen a few of their tweets. They're pretty good stuff. Yeah. You can find Mama Bear Apologetics. I think primarily it's 3 gals. They bring in guests and they speak. So they're pretty good. But they're talking about, within a Christian context, the power of a deconversion story and how different people who are, these Christian authors or Christian whatever have these stories of how they moving away, deconverting to, their traditional or their fundamentalist things or whatever they're doing. And this story on theirs is their podcast, I guess 28. But it talks about that power of a deconversion story, and they frame it as pretty interesting. They give these 5 qualities, and I think they're summarizing an article or a book by another guy. And it's linked in their article, but I came across theirs, so I'll use it from theirs. And here's one of the things they said: step 1 in creating this atmosphere where people will accept your deconversion story. They say this. In this podcast they were listening to from this gal that was, sharing her deconversion story, and she's been on like ABC and NBC because, of course, anytime you want to be critical of what would be considered, traditional Christian faith and accepting Christian moral standards, traditional marriage, all that stuff, that's big news. So you get on all the shows. And this gal's been on The View and all these other stuff. But they were listening to this special, this episode or video of this gal. And the apology, and this guy who's writing this on the right. I think they're summarizing the guys here, but I can't even say it. Mama Bear apologist gals are writing. They said, so she hasn't made any claims that I really disagree with. They're listening to they're 30 minutes into this thing, and like all of a sudden it clicks. She hasn't made any claims that I disagree with. Mm-hmm. And they know where this gal stands, and they know that there are many, many things that they disagree theologically and biblically about. But they're 30 minutes in, like, well, this person isn't like, this isn't what I expected. She's like, but then I thought more and realized, wait, she hasn't made any claims. In fact, she has used such generalized language that I'm not even sure what her point is. It was at that moment that I realized that something was amiss. After covering the Women's March last year in a blog and a podcast, I'm very wary when a controversial issue rises and I can't locate the actual claim. This should always be a clue that the actual claim is being masked. Mm-hmm. Or I'm being groomed so that when the person makes the controversial claim, I have been lulled into a sense of safety and it slips in without me noticing. Yes. And I read that, and there's 5 great points in this whole thing about this deconversion story and how we go to accept them. But what jumped out at me is this idea of, to use that term, is I'm being groomed. Mm-hmm. And this idea that you use such just vague, you're talking about all these issues that are potentially controversial, whether it's gun rights or race or sex and marriage, all that stuff. You start off by just making these, grants of, hey, we all agree it's wrong to hurt a woman. Well, okay, nobody disagrees. And, you just keep talking with such vague terms that eventually everyone's like, oh, I like this person. They're so wise, because you give them the room to fill in the gaps of whatever they're thinking it means. Oh, that was so offensive to me. Well, what was offensive? You never say what the offense was. You just say you're offended. And then people start saying, oh, yeah, I've been offended once. I can sympathize or empathize with their offense. And so, but this idea of grooming is what jumped in, because, you look at all these cases where, what is it? The USA Gymnastics is having the problem with these pedophiles who have, the girls talk about the grooming process that goes on with pedophiles. USA Swimming is into this now. And, maybe those stories we'll delve into someday. But the same idea of, grooming was how these pedophiles work.
And the deal is to let you fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
This happens every 4 years.
Yeah,
it happens every 4 years, where we'll get a politician who'll come out with a great statement or whatever, and you spend the whole election season trying to figure out what they believe.
Well, yeah, in politics, it's a little easy and obvious. Yeah. When George Bush, the last one, was in his last term and the Democrats ran against them because the Republicans had spent like drunken sailors and they'd ran up the deficit, and Pelosi comes out, oh, this is irresponsible spending and blah blah blah. And so then as soon as they get control and Obama's in, they start spending like drunken sailors. And then the Republicans, oh, this is irresponsible spending. As soon as they take over, they start spending like drunken sailors.
It's the same deal.
And by the way, no drunken sailors were harmed in the filming of this video. But I just don't want anyone to be triggered and offended.
Sure.
But attach it to our Christian stuff. As I was looking at this, and that's why I don't even name this gal that this is about. But I can think of, off the top of my head, easily 5, 6 very super popular books by, fabulously famous Christian authors who are bestseller list people that write these books that are so vapid and empty that I read them and I'm like, there's nothing even being said here. And then they go on year after year writing these empty, vapid books that sell tens of thousands of copies.
Right. But
and it's exactly because people can fill it in. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, 10 years into their career, Rob Bell I'll gladly name him. We're trying not to name people by name, but he's so public at this point. There's no hidden there, but he's a good example of that. But then all of a sudden, everyone else thinks when they go off the rails, like, oh, I reject God now. Every path leads to God, and people are like, I never saw that coming. It's because what lack of discernment is there amongst Christians that we read these books and we don't see how empty they are, that they're really grooming us from the beginning. It's just such a great term. And how do we,
this morning, it's so funny we're talking about this morning. I had, and this is totally exemplified in this whole statement. This morning, my wife was listening to a video, and she was listening to this interview on the video. And the whole time, I was just barely awake, and I was listening to the interview, and I was thinking to myself, these people are crazy. this was two Christians who were having a conversation about some really deeply personal issues. And what I think was missing was the authentic Christian voice who would say, we need to take these issues to the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take these issues, and they need to be, and our solutions need to be founded, in Scripture. But that was so missing, and I think it's what passes for, I want to say, Christianity today.
Yeah.
Is a lack of thinking, a lack of discernment, a lack of wisdom, a lack of truth, a lack of biblical emphasis. And then when these books all come out, because people have been taught to emote and to connect with people so emotionally and somewhat applicationally, not at the doctrinal level, not at a scriptural level, but just this not real thing, we're going to connect with people. And then all of a sudden we wonder why people are spending thousands of dollars on books that don't really say anything.
Well, the thing that they do say is it's exactly that. They're so empty and meaningless. They say what the reader wants them to say.
Right.
They hear the message they want to hear, and they can fill in the gaps. So a conservative, traditional Christian, somebody who falls within that camp, at least, even though maybe they're not deeply thoughtful about that, they read it and say, oh, I love this book.
Yeah.
Because when they make these vague theological assertions,
you can fill in the gaps.
They fill in the gaps. And so the more on the liberal side of Christian, who that's the camp they fall in, and maybe not deeply thinking in that camp either, they read the same book and they fill in their thoughts, and they all love this person because it's so.
And this is a good writer, a good orator who knows how to appeal vaguely, to be able to get to make the money, the book will sell, to be able to do that. And it's and the lack of discernment is just incredible. Our society is being stripped of the ability to be able to think well and reason well.
I think part of that is the reason why our schools, our grade schools and high schools are so bad in Western. People want them to be so bad.
Yeah, they want exactly.
They want them to be bad because they don't want people to think. They don't want people to reason for themselves.
It's part of the grooming process.
That's exactly right,
and that's why it's such a great word to me.
Which is why
it is.
I never connected it with this topic.
Right.
Our schools are so focused on the birds and the bees instead of the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. I wonder why that is.
Oh,
that was so profound, wasn't it?
That's so profound. Margie, take note of that.
Yes. And speaking of which, I think we'd be remiss to not talk about this topic. This topic is remiss. This woman says that she's cast demons out of Oscar winners, politicians, and movie bosses. She's the exorcist to Hollywood. That's what she does.
Well, she's got a lot more work to do.
I was going to say, it's not
she hasn't been really good at her job. You know what I mean? But she talks about in this article how she creates this atmosphere where she's in, and it starts out, a woman stands over a Hollywood actress chanting and shaking a rattle carved with a head inspired by shamanic art as her client lies motionless on a narrow bed. The tension in the air is thick as this healer places an ornate dagger on this person's wrist, breathing deep, rapid, breathless summons higher beings from the spirit world, asking them to rid this person of her evil demons. I wonder how that works out, especially when we look at Hollywood.
It's clearly not working.
If you look at the moral status of Hollywood, I mean, Weinstein.
Does she do this with them around, or she just does this by proxy, just over her TV?
Oh no, she does it. So she goes to their house and she does exorcisms for
them.
them.
Outside their house, or she's in their house?
In the house
with the person, with the individual.
She said she's cleansed thousands of tormented people from Hollywood moguls. She didn't obviously get the Harvey Weinstein. Actors and actresses to stay-at-home moms and politicians. And she works pro bono. She doesn't get paid to do this.
That's just odd. I don't know what even to make of that.
I mean, I think it's interesting.
It is.
Yeah, but theologically, it's I don't have a problem with the idea of demonic world. I'm not even, I've got my own little stories of experiences, I think, with the idea of at least demonic oppression or maybe possession type situations that I would classify, because I don't have a problem.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with
but I guess
with that sort of thing.
The thing is but it's like Jesus says, if you cast out a demon and you don't, just 7 more return kind of thing. It's what is she really doing? If I don't know is there any tie to that theologically?
Well, she says she's non-denominational. She says she's not against Christian or other religious things. She's non-denominational. and she doesn't care.
Well, do we know what her basis for claiming the demonic world exists and how to cast it out and the basis for it?
Well, she just probably looks at Hollywood and says, "There's a bunch of demons over there."
Well, yeah.
Well, that's exactly one of those vague things. Then it's like
incredibly vague.
Although the topic itself is controversial, it's still sort of a rather grooming thing. She's saying, "Oh, I've done this for famous people." So people say, well, then if it's for famous people, they must acknowledge that it's true. So I'm going to believe it, but there's not a lot of appeal to authority kind of stuff, and so to validate it's
really strange.
It's weird.
It is very strange. I don't know. That's
but I thought that we would be saying that
you're wanting to invite her to come over. Is that what you're saying?
She'd work really well here.
Yeah,
she'd have a lot to do.
I can think of a few people.
Yes.
Well.
We won't name any names.
We won't name any names.
Yeah, right. That's a weird story, man.
Well,
that
reminds me of a comment by Steven Pinker.
Speaking of demonic possession,
exactly.
I had this one by Steven Pinker.
And a Harvard professor, Steven Pinker, in reference to talking about hardships and bad things that happen, for instance, like the shooting. So it reminds me, if you're going to be assaulted by a demon, being assaulted by a rifle. So
assault weapons, demonic
assault, not just for the ears.
That's their theme.
Well, and it's easy to say that use what we call the Flip Wilson theology. You know what Flip Wilson theology is?
No, I knew Flip Wilson was.
The devil made me do it.
Right. And the question is, why'd you let him?
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. See, he had a comeback for that one.
Yeah. That's always a good comeback.
So this Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker, who's an atheist, he appeals to tragedies such as the shootings, but other ones as well. He says such events cast doubt on the idea that there is a benevolent shepherd who looks out for human welfare. What was the benevolent shepherd doing while a teenager was massacring his classmates? If you're counting on God to make the world a better place, you are probably going to make the world a worse place because he is not listening, and we saw that yesterday. Now, I bring this up because a lot of people will have this kind of question in reference to a massacre that transpired as it goes. And unfortunately, I mean, there is no Steven Pinker doesn't have a real answer, and there's many problems with this, and we can talk about that. But there's
it's very similar, by the way. I mean, you can go on, but it's very similar to the tweet by Neil deGrasse Tyson that came out. Like prayer.
Right,
if you were relying on prayer, is it in there?
Yeah, evidence collected over many years, obtained from many locations, indicates that the power of prayer is insufficient to stop bullets from killing school children.
The Babylon Bee, by the way, had a news story there in response to deGrasse Tyson. Yeah. It's like, clearly prayer is not enough to stop Neil deGrasse Tyson from saying moronic things on the internet.
That's funny. But you know what? Neither do laws. Gun control laws don't stop bullets from killing school children.
Well, yeah, because murders against the law hasn't stopped anybody yet.
Right. So it doesn't. You can't blame the law or this type that you can't. There's no cause and effect there. But Neil deGrasse is fails to understand as an atheist what prayer is about. It's not designed to stop bullets.
But that one was written by a Harvard dude, right?
But this is written by Harvard, right?
Mentions that quote from him.
Right. He talks about this type of massacre showing that God does not exist.
So his premise seems to be then, if you're relying on God to help you, he assumes that means you're not willing to do anything that he considers practical. Politics.
Well,
I mean, that seems to be the underlying assumption.
This guy, benevolent shepherd, doesn't exist. He didn't help out. So if you rely on him, you're not going to make this world a better place. So he's going from that to no God to you believing God, not helping out. You're not going to be part of the solution. You're part of the problem.
Well, there's multiple problems with that. Sure. First is it's like he's making the argument sort of like that. The kid is that. What's the old joke? Hey, I've got this. They got this contraption out in the yard. It's all these one of those like sort of Rube Goldberg machines. It does all these crazy things. And somebody says, "What's that for?" Oh, it's to scare away alligators. Well, there are no alligators around here. See, it works. Kind of
exactly.
I mean, that's kind of like the argument there in reverse. He's saying, well, see, if you're relying on God to stop these things, they happen. Therefore, God clearly has no impact on the world. So the first problem is, well, what about people who have come to faith, who were living lives of crime and we're doing bad stuff and stopped.
And stuff, right.
They don't become those people. So it has impacted.
If you throw all the evidence to the contrary, then there is no evidence.
Exactly.
And I think that's what he's doing.
Or he's saying that because any case exists, therefore no case exists.
Exactly right.
That's part of that foolishness.
And I think the point also is that I think they wish for a world that does not exist.
On this side of heaven.
Exactly. They wish for a world
which
where
they say doesn't exist.
Where nothing bad ever happens.
Will exist.
Where people don't run into the churches and shoot people in churches.
Right.
I mean, that world, this side of heaven does not.
Right. Revelations 24, when the Lord takes away pain and suffering and tears and sorrow.
That's a future date.
And the yearning that everyone has in their heart for that perfect world comes from the Lord himself.
Right.
The solution doesn't come from man.
That's exactly right.
And he one of the things here is about the evidence where he talks about that is like, well, Christian charities. There's so many Christian charities that have done well. Compassion International and most churches do things for other people to help out and be part of the solution and aren't part of the problem. How about hospitals? Hospitals were developed because of the Christian faith, directly because of what Christians have done historically. So if he's ever been to a hospital,
he's already a beneficiary.
He needs to pucker up and think a Christian.
This is the thing that Margie and I were talking about yesterday, and I was saying to Margie how in the early centuries, because the pagan world and the Christian worldview were so stark, Christian worldview stood out because of the starkness of the pagan worldview. Whereas now we're living in a time in history where the Christian worldview has been baked into society, and it's so much more difficult for the Christian worldview to stand apart from society. Not in the sense that there's no distinction, but when you look at all the good things that are in society, which came from a Christian worldview, it's hard to see how an NGO that is feeding the poor is different than a Christian worldview. It's hard to see that because you have people who are trying to duplicate or duplicating the good works that Christians do. So it becomes difficult to see how in their view, how Christian worldview actually makes a difference.
It does.
Well, I agree that it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wish atheists would be.
This is the article again?
Yeah.
You're not wishing this.
I wish the atheists would be half as critical of what they say as what other people say or believe.
Yeah.
Because this is just mental mush. There's nothing about it that should even it shouldn't even be printed really, because Christians and even other religions too, but Christians in particular, because here in the West, are doing a great deal of things.
Sure.
Yeah, there was
and
a
helping
Twitter,
end slavery.
There was a Twitter exchange that because I retweeted with a critique.
Are you in the Twitter beefs?
DeGrasse Tyson. What's that?
Are you in the Twitter beefs?
Yeah,
you're a Twitter gangster.
We're on Periscope. We're using Twitter's thing, man.
Twitter gangster.
But all these little atheist people responded, and there was one because somebody else actually made a comment that I didn't make, but they're like, yeah, society shows that they're better off with a Christian worldview than an atheist one, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so this atheist person responded, well, where's the empirical evidence that is? Can you give me something that's repeatable and in an experimental situation? So they're not even understanding the principles of what works in terms of evidence, in terms of logic,
well, the scientific
or even a
method
person.
Is what he's talking about.
They're assuming that, they're talking about the scientific method applied to history,
right.
which is foolishness. But there's no understanding that the scientific method doesn't apply to historical events. And so if the person's making an historical argument, the response isn't, well, show me the empirical evidence. The response is, show me historical evidence.
Right.
But that's part of the challenge. That's why stuff like that gets out there, because there's no understanding of even what's being said.
I know we're probably coming up on time, but
we are.
Yeah.
Almost.
We need to talk about Billy Graham.
Well, before we do that, just one other thing on this before we fish. I had a prof, because you said he gives no answers, and people have all these answers to tie all this, whether it's the school shootings or issues like this, all in a little bow, and people want to pass. Well, we got to pass these laws.
Right.
I had a professor once that told me, he said, laws demonstrate immorality, not goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The more laws you have, the more immoral you are, not the better you are.
Right.
And so
the thing is, legislate goodness.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Laws are no terror to good works.
If you go to a culture that no woman has ever been sexually assaulted or raped, they don't have a law against sexual assault or rape.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're from the outside, from a country where you have that, like we clearly have those problems here. If you go to the country and say, oh, well, you don't protect women, you don't even have a law. See, that would be their perception.
Right.
You don't
Right.
care about women. You don't have a law to protect them. And they would say, protect them from what?
Right.
So we think we're superior morally because we pass a law.
Right.
When actually the reason we need to pass a law is because we're morally inferior.
Sure.
So laws demonstrate our immorality and our goodness. And so all these folks who think that because we're moving into this time where we're passing all these new laws that have never been passed, they assume as they look back on American history that it's because no one's ever cared about those issues. Oh, you never cared that these happened. That's why there's no law to protect X, Y, Z. What they don't realize is that those laws weren't there in many cases. I'm talking about something broadly as sexual harassment that's been around since humanity's beginning. But I'm saying in many of these areas, they think because no specific laws there, that means that's the negative against those past ages. When in truth, in many cases, it's because we've degenerated societally, that we need to keep passing these new laws, and we don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't understand laws are really that demonstration. The AR-50 or AR-15 has been around since the 50s when it got licensed by Colt from Armalite licensed the Colt to take it on, and they've been around. So this weapon has been around for 50 years in the public, yet it's only in the last bunch that we have this specific weapon causing trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the weapon that's causing the trouble. It's the humans that are wielding it.
I think someone pointed out that if you're over 40, you've never seen that. You didn't grow up with child massacres at schools. Right. And that's true. We didn't. Yeah. If you're over 40, you didn't see that. And I think at
least not this way.
Not in this way. I think if you listen, Governor Blevin, I think from Kentucky, made a great observation. The problem is not the gun. The problem is not the gun. If you put a gun up, you can load an AR-15 and you can put it on the table and leave it there, and it will not stand up and shoot you.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
All right. Has that been tested empirically?
It actually has.
Okay.
Somebody posted a shotgun with ammo outside, and going, look, these kids are walking by, and the whole day, maybe the mailman will get shot. Yeah. Actually,
it doesn't work that way. And the real issue is our view of man. Some people believe that men are evil, and because of that, they make laws to protect.
Our founding fathers understood the depravity of man.
Yeah. And some people think that men are only bad because of their environment. And that is just nonsense.
I just saw that on ESPN is doing this series on black athletes.
Sure.
And they have all these guys on stage talking about, and they had this one guy who was talking about being compassionate towards everybody. And his whole speech was, I just happened to turn right at this moment. And he said, I believe that inherently everybody's morally good. We're all, if it wasn't for society, that's exactly it. It's so prevalent, that thinking outside of a biblical Christian worldview that humanity is morally good or, morally neutral.
It's not true.
This empty tablet, so to speak. But
they have a false sense of security in the laws. And a false sense of security.
Yeah, as if we pass these, it's going to solve the problems. And the real question is,
and what I appreciate is everyone's on the same page. We want the massacres to stop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The solution is not the same because we don't have the same view of human beings, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's.
I keep asking myself, when people propose XYZ laws, which not to mean there couldn't be other laws we pass, whatever. Right. But when people make specific suggestions, my first question always is, how does this specific law stop what we just saw in XYZ situation? And pick how that would have stopped this. And if it does, then I say, well, then probably it's a good idea. But if it's just this vaguely worded law that's impossible to enforce, that wouldn't have stopped anything, what's the point except to make our go back to the emotive? I feel better because I did something.
And the answer is, if the answer is to take away guns from regular law-abiding citizens, it's like saying to deer and antelope, we're going to remove your hooves and your horns. We're going to take all your hooves and your horns. We don't want the predators, the lions, the tigers, and the bears to have any problem eating you. So we're going to take away the things that you use to defend yourself. We're going to take your hooves, we're going to surgically remove them, and hopefully those lions with all those sharp claws and all those sharp teeth, hopefully they won't eat you. That's what they're saying to people. And I don't have a gun.
So you're suggesting transspecial surgery.
Exactly. Why not? Hey,
to change their spatial identity.
But I'm just showing that it's ludicrous. In the words of Mike Tyson, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. It doesn't make Doesn't make
that
an
was a
ounce of
terrible Mike
sense.
Tyson
I know.
impression.
I can't make a good one.
I don't want
It doesn't make an ounce of good sense. It is, and it's sad because I want to have a dialogue with people, and I think that we need to. But if we're not going to start at an honest look at man, you can't tell me that taking the guns away from all the law-abiding citizens is going to solve the problem.
And you're not talking about gun laws.
I'm not talking about
you're
no
talking
gun laws.
about gun laws that make sense
Yeah.
based on an understanding of of weapons
Right.
that will make a difference.
Sure.
While at the same time because I just want to make sure
Sure.
that we understand
I'm
that
not opposing any of those things either that make sense, that are
people
rational.
can protect themselves
But not emotive laws.
Right.
Laws that make me feel better but don't do anything.
And I've said this, and there's kids that are having conversations now who are really talking about this, and they're angry, and rightfully so. But I would say this, and I say this with all humility. This is a generation that does not understand that Tide Pods is not food. I know.
Oh gosh.
I know that came out.
I actually had to have a conversation with my kids. Okay, kids,
It's not
let me
food.
survey you. They're like, they're just, young preteen, one preteen, early teen for my two younger ones. And I said, if I said to you, swallow this Tide Pod, what would be your response? Just curious if you think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that would be harmful, wouldn't it? I was like,
Yeah,
pretty much.
Well, yes,
We
you're
actually
right.
got rid of them because our infant kids didn't know.
Yeah, but if you
yeah,
need to
and-
get rid of them for your college age kids, that's a problem.
That's a
But
problem, right?
exactly.
And it isn't to disregard kids, because I love kids. I've coached kids. Kids are important. Their views are important. They should not be relegated or pushed to the corner just because they're kids. We should listen to them. But it's the adults that make the laws. The founding fathers bequeathed to us rights, right? And we're not just making decisions for our generation. We're making decisions for later generations.
Right.
And we need to not be moved emotionally here. We need to do it reasonably.
Yeah.
So
Well, with that, we do have a couple minutes left. You wanted to go into
Billy Graham.
Billy Graham
Died today, and I was thinking about Billy Graham, and Margie and I got a chance to go to his the event that he had in San Diego, and that was wonderful to listen to him preach. We're blessed to have heard him preach, but I think the message that he taught right after September 11th showed me the value of not only a great man of God, but a great preacher. Because that 11-minute, I think 43-second message that he gave to a nation that was wounded and was hurting, and pointed us to God's grace, his sovereignty in the midst of our difficulty, and our need to turn toward him, was one of the most healing messages, words of God that I've ever heard in my entire life. As a matter of fact, I listened to it today and was still just emotional over listening to that message, because I remember waking up that morning and just being angry, angry and want revenge. But just listening to him was one of the great honors that we got living in this day and age.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you can talk about legacy, and there's a lot of people, he has his critics, his supporters, whatever. But I do think the one thing you say there is important is, we can have our differences and we can keep our theological integrity and biblical, authority and all those things, but still try to be peacemakers and healers to all these things. So whether we start off with this idea of, people just overreacting and going from a 0 to a 10 and just getting angry off the cuff, just crazy, and all these circumstances, whether it's that or killing and just whatever people resort to, we can all agree that certainly that idea of trying to be a peacemaker, which he did, and again, somebody's going to critique the way he did or whatever, fine. But,
perfect.
But his goal was to be a peacemaker, to be a healer between people of those different backgrounds, and healing through Christ, obviously, in his salvation, his shed blood, what he did on the cross. But that has to begin with conversations where we're not so, and Christians, we got to do better at not being so negative and casting aspersions and just name calling against
people
those we disagree with,
right.
and being far more compassionate towards those who we just simply have disagreements with, because we should show the same love of God.
I try it every day with Ward.
I know. That's your test.
And
He's your
fail.
testing
I'm
guy.
I failed.
And fail.
We were in the library earlier, so I just try.
That's why this is a good opportunity to show.
Right,
You guys to practice.
And you know, he's
Exactly.
acting like he's getting off, but he's the one
He's the
chief
instigator.
instigator.
He's the
No.
chief instigator.
oh, denial.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not just a river.
The chief
I don't
instigator.
instigate anything. Ward, do you remember that thing you said to you the other day?
No, which one?
I don't try to. All of them.
You don't try to bring up anything.
that's
Yeah, I should
right.
write it.
Uh-huh.
I don't deflect and make you guys a fight. That's part of what makes this entertaining. Is I want to see you guys fight, and that'll be great. So, all right. Well, any last words on? You didn't get to say anything on the
I never do.
Telegram stuff. Oh, well, that's just not true.
Not true.
Anything you want to say on that Billy Graham thing? Or?
Oh, God bless him, and may we all be more like him.
Mhm.
So
And you met Billy Graham, not Leroy, because you
Yeah,
touched
I
him.
definitely-
Again, you
I
touched him.
He
definitely-
keeps like touching me.
I definitely-
That's a
and-
control
and
mechanism.
I think we should be more like Leroy too.
Yes.
All right.
Well, we should be.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for our time. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. We're going to do this next week. We hope to do the same exact thing right here, same time. Now, whether life gets in the way or we change different ways as this goes on, this is live and off the cuff, so we might change week to week. But you can check it out. Again, we'll try to keep doing on Periscope and YouTube Live every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific time here. If you need the website, it's morethancake.org/off-the-cuff. And we'll probably have other ways to link it
And
online
maybe
eventually.
add that. Can you add that link to the video or
Yeah,
something?
we're gonna
We'll
have-
make it available
Once
there.
this video is archived and done, Leroy's wife is going to have some liner notes.
We're gonna go back
summaries
and
of
cut
what
out
stuff
some of the
is.
things that we
We're not
said.
cutting out anything.
We didn't
This
cut
is
out part.
gonna be it. But we'll have liner notes to let people know when it is, and what content is in each show, and with links to all these things going forward. If people want to tweet it out, if you use the hashtag off the cuff, I'll be tracking that, and then that way we can kind of try to keep connected who's mentioning the show. So if you hashtag off the cuff, we'll try to track that and keep connected.
Excellent.
Ask us questions, email us questions. You can email us from that webpage I just gave a second ago as well to any of us. Hate mail goes directly to Leroy. Love mail goes to me. And Ward, I don't know, I'm sure if they want to contact you or not, but they might. So
Next week, I'm gonna bring my phone and I'm gonna play my phone.
no,
I'm gonna dial him
we're not going to do
next
that.
week so that everybody can hear his.
Why don't you go shut that off?
So everybody can hear his.
I left my
ringer.
phone in the other room.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be back.
Hey, thank you guys.